If you want to learn about spreadsheets, this is the right place. What is a spreadsheet? Well, if you really want to know, click on the History of Spreadsheets video that I also attached to this same Google Classroom post. But basically, it is a piece of software that stores lots of data in little boxes called cells, C-E-L-L, cells. You can type in manually the data, 12, 14, 16 apples. You can copy and paste the data into it, or you can actually, if you have, here's tracker, I can copy. So let me say the shortcuts I'm using as I'm doing it. Control A, generally on every computer, selects all. And if you're on a Mac, anytime I say the word control, you should hit the command key. I'll keep saying control though. So control A selects all, control C copies. If I go back to my spreadsheet, control V pastes. You should just know those shortcuts always for life. So usually you're not going to be manually typing in numbers, but you might be. It depends what you're doing. I've got some data. I can do things to that data using the spreadsheet. The data stays in the spreadsheet, it saves. If I want to, here's a column with some time numbers in it. If I just randomly want 2 times each of those numbers, a spreadsheet makes it easy to do that. You can type, you can move around with the arrow keys, up, down, left, right, moves around. You can just start typing. You don't have to click. You can click, like if you double click it will start typing in there. Another way you can enter data is there's this little formula bar up here next to where it says FX. If I start typing in that formula bar, it is one way that you can input information. You can either think of it typing in here or you can think of typing in here. It's the same either way. Sometimes the formula bar is more convenient to see a really long formula that you're typing. So here, if I'm just trying to multiply all these t numbers times 2, anytime you want a spreadsheet to do math for you, you type an equal sign, and then I don't need to type 0.03334788836 if I want this number. That's one of the beauties of spreadsheets. Once you've got the data entered, you never have to manually type it all again. Instead, I can say equals, and I can just go over there and literally click it with the mouse. That's one way. And you see it pops up this A3. What does that mean? Column A, row 3. So every cell has an address. If I click on that address, it's column followed by row. Column, row. I want that one. And I want to multiply by 2. So Shift 8 gives me an asterisk. Times, the asterisk means times, and I can just type the number 2, hit enter, and it calculates it. I think you've seen me already do this in class where you can drag this fill handle or magic handle. If you click on that and drag down, it will automatically take the formula that you typed in this box and it will copy it to the next box, but it will do that in a smart way where it updates the cell that you're pointing to. Instead of still pointing to A3, now it sees that I'm in a new row, one further down, so it stays in that same row and it points to A4. Same thing here, it points to A5. They update intelligently the formula so that it is applied to the new data in the new row. Sometimes Google Sheets will pop up with an automatic recommendation for you. It didn't do that here because this column is blank. Like if I had done this, by the way, if I click on the E, it highlights the whole column. If I click delete, the delete key, it deletes all of it. If I had done what I just did right here instead, 2t equals A3. Notice this time I typed A3 and it worked. You can type the cell if you know it. You don't have to go click on it. Asterisk 2. And when I hit enter, you see how it suggests an autofill, it does that when it knows how far down to autofill. And the reason it knows how far down to autofill is because there's this column of data right next to it that ends on row 44. A while ago I was over here in column E and there was a blank column, so it didn't know how far down to go. You can click on the check mark, or you can see it says Control plus Enter. Control plus Enter will do the autofill for you. What else? So that's multiplication. What if I wanted to divide t divided by 2? Well, that formula would be A3 slash or / 2. Enter. Now, because there was already data down there, it doesn't overwrite it. If you look at the formula bar right here, as I scroll down, you see that it changes back to multiplication. So if I want to update that, I have to drag it down. Now they're all updated to t divided by 2. What other operations can you do? You can do plus. You can do minus. You can do a caret, which is raised to a power, so this would be A3 squared. It does all those basic operations. It also, spreadsheets also have many built-in formulas. If you click on Insert Function, these common ones at the top are always at the top: sum, average, count, max, min. But it's got a lot of formulas built in, more than we will ever use. Absolute value, inverse cosine, cosine, E, we might actually end up using that one a lot. EXP is E to the some number. Like if you can think of some function that you use in math, logarithm base 10, modulo, what else we got? Sum if, you can get really fancy and only add numbers if they meet a certain criteria. So you can insert formulas from that menu, or if you know the name of them, you can just start typing them. Like if I want to know, let me show you. You can click on D to get the whole column, or you can click Control Space and it will select the entire column that you're currently in. Delete. All right. So let's say I want the average of the times. I can say equals average, and notice everything that includes AVER in the function name pops up. I hit the tab and it accepted the first one. Now there's lots of ways you can use this. These functions need inputs. I don't want to go manually click on all of them. Instead, I can see that A3 is the beginning, A3, and in almost every spreadsheet, when you put a colon after a cell, it selects the entire range between that first cell and whatever the next cell you type is. So A44 is the last one. So A44. Now you see how A3 is the beginning, colon means pick everything in between, and A44 is the last one. I just selected all of those numbers. Closing parentheses, you may not even need to type that. Hit enter. Now it did two things. First, it calculated the average, and then Google Sheets is like, hey, do you want me to fill this formula in down? Which, it doesn't make any sense to do that, because the formula is an average of all the time numbers. It doesn't make sense to calculate a new average. It needs a row here, so I'm going to click no, don't do that. That's the average of all of the time numbers. What if you want to know the biggest one? Max time. You can put equals, max, same thing, A3 to A, what was it, 44? 44, yeah. Hey, that's the biggest one. What if I want to know the smallest time? Equals, min, A3 to A44. No, don't fill. What else? What else can we do? That's just how you use some basic formulas. More complicated formulas might need more than one input, like let's I don't know why you would want to do this, but I just want to show you a function that needs more than one input. Equals sum if, a conditional sum across a range. Now, this formula is a little more complicated. First thing it's looking for is a range of numbers, like A1 to A10. Okay, so let me pick the B values, B3 to B44. But I see that there's a negative one, and I don't know, maybe there's some more negative ones. Maybe this is 1,000 data points and I don't want to scroll through all of them. Maybe I want to add up only the positive numbers. This function is looking for more than one input in parentheses. The first input was the range, then I put a comma, and it even switches, like before the comma, the range is in green. After I put the comma, now it says criterion. And it shows you an example of a criterion. Double quote, greater than 20, double quote. There's lots of ways you can type this criterion. We're not going to dive into all the details of that. But I'll just say greater than 0. And then comma. What's this last one? Sum range. The range to be summed if different from range. Okay, this gets into a really complicated use of sum if. That's not what I'm trying to do right now. But you see how it's in square brackets, and when I look down here, let me put a comma so it highlights the text I want you to look at. When sum range optional. Anytime you see an input in a function that's optional, it means the function can be used without that input. So right now, it's going to add together all the numbers in this range as long as they are greater than 0. If I hit enter, there it is. I'm not saying we're going to use sum if very often, but you might encounter a function that needs more than one input, and this is how it works. You separate the inputs with commas, and Google Sheets is really good at explaining on the fly when you're using it how the function is supposed to work. It shows you an example, and if that wasn't enough, you can click on Learn More and really go crazy reading about whatever function you're trying to use is. It's taking a while to load. Okay. All right. Those are some basics about data entry and functions and how to calculate things with Excel. You should really never reach for a calculator when you have, I said Excel, in Sheets. You should never reach for a calculator when you have a spreadsheet open, because it is a calculator. You just type equals and start doing whatever math you want. 10 times 4 divided by 2 plus 10 divided by 3 plus e to the 4 minus the sine of 30. Notice that when I'm in sine, it's not giving me the sine. Come on, give me the helper. Turn on formula help. There we go. Sine, angle. We will use some trig at some point in a spreadsheet. The angle to find sine and radians. Just a warning, when we start using the trig functions in spreadsheets, they want the input to be in radians. Oh, what if you forgot how to do that? Well, you can type degrees, another function, and that converts an angle in radians to degrees. Oh, okay, so I want to enter, let's say pi radians. Oh, I don't want to type all the digits of pi. You can type pi. Pi is a constant. It doesn't have any inputs. You just type pi, open parentheses, close parentheses, and it gives you pi to, what did it say, 14 decimal places. Close parentheses for the degrees function, close parentheses for the sine function. I'm just doing some nonsense calculation right here. This doesn't mean anything. Enter, I want to get a number. Wait, cool. What if I meant to divide by 2 plus the rest of this stuff? Well, then I have to group parentheses. It's really not good at order of operations unless you plug in parentheses everywhere so that you know it's going to follow the order of operations you want. All right. Graphs. There's some basics for graphs that you need to know. Some common things that we'll do. When you have data that you want to graph, already arranged with the thing on the x-axis in a column and the thing on the y-axis in a column to the right of that. That's the easiest situation to insert a graph. You just highlight, and you can include the axis labels, highlight all the data, like I just did. By the way, to do that, you click in the middle, hold down the mouse, and drag around to select whatever you want. All right, I did that. Go to Insert, Chart, and it might pop up with something that's not a scatter plot. The settings over here will help you change the type of the graph to a scatter plot. We always want a scatter plot. When you do it this way, it has a good title and it even labels the axes with whatever you had in the header row to describe this data. But you'll encounter situations where you need to create a graph and the time numbers are over here and the velocity numbers are right here. Like right now, I want a graph of velocity versus time. The way I have the data organized actually is one of the most convenient ways. If you know you're going to be plotting these velocity numbers versus those same time numbers as the x ones, you can just keep adding columns to the right if you want to keep using time as the x values. So what I can do is insert chart, and I did that without any numbers selected, so I get a blank chart. Now, under setup, I'll go ahead and make it a scatter plot. Data range. This box is pretty useful when you have a lot of different things you want to graph. If I select the data range, I'm going to go from here down and include column C. Like that. Click OK. And it might pop up with what it thinks you want on the graph. That's okay. Sometimes it might get it right, sometimes it might get it wrong. But after you set the data range, you can go and click, like x-axis, which of these columns should be my x-axis. I know right now I still want to use time, so I'll click time. It did that by default. It actually got that part right. Series, it sees that I have two columns. It decided to plot both of those as a separate series, which is pretty good. If on this graph I just wanted velocity, then I could click on the three dots by x and click remove, and there's velocity. So when you know you're going to end up making graphs, it's a good idea to plan ahead in where your data is laid out in the spreadsheet. It's usually a good idea to put your x-axis data first, and then any other sets of data that you're going to plot versus the x-axis right next to it. Now, a feature that I'll show you is, let's say I already had this graph and I added a column next to it. I could go let me fix this. Okay, so I have t and x, I have a graph, and then I've found some more data that I want to put on the same graph. So I've placed this data here next to it, and I want to get that data on this graph. Well, step one is change the data range so that it includes that column. So if I change this to C44 and hit enter, it may not automatically update. That's okay. If you change the data range, you can go down here to series and click on add series, and it will pop up. If you did this data range first, now it will pop up and give you the option to pick velocity. Sometimes this button, use row 2 as headers, it sees where all the numbers are and it sees that you have labels above the numbers. If that gets unchecked, you might want to check it back when you're doing multiple different series on one graph, because it will label those for you nicely in this legend. If I don't have that checked, then there's no label really there. Use column A as labels. If I don't have, I think this is always checked by default. So that first column is it's not always A, it's just whatever column is to the farthest to the left in your set of numbers. That's almost always a good idea. That column should be the X values. When it says labels, it really means the labels on the X axis. Okay, some customization options. If I go to customize, chart style, you can change the background color, you can do different font, change border color, chart axis titles. You will be dealing with that first one, chart style. You'll probably never be changing anything in there, but you can. Wait, it does need a background. Border color, I'll leave it purple. Chart and axis titles. There's this drop-down box where you can change title, subtitle, horizontal axis, and vertical axis. So chart title is position and velocity versus time. By the way, you would never plot position and velocity on the same graph. That's kind of absurd, because what is the y-axis? Sheets doesn't know what position and velocity are. Sheets is just putting these numbers on this y-axis. You would never put velocity and position on the same y-axis because they're not measured in the same thing. So ignore that weird thing that I'm doing. This is the title, chart subtitle. This is the subtitle. Let's see where it pops up. Like, I don't know why you would want that, but maybe you do. There's a subtitle. Horizontal axis we will use a lot. That's time in seconds. It puts this label down here. Vertical axis. Now on this graph, I don't really know what I would type. Position in centimeters, but I've also plotted velocity on here. This is kind of a nonsensical graph. Series. You can apply to all series, or you can pick a series to edit. Like if I want this one to be purple and the size of the markers to be small, I can change just that one. If I want all of the series to be 2 pixels, I can do that all at the same time. I want them to be squares, 10 pixels. If I go back to X, you can change the colors. Point shape, axis, right axis. Now, actually, this is a little better. When you have 2 axes, sometimes you can plot different sets of data on the same graph if the axes are different. So like, I still don't know why you would want to display this on this graph, but if position goes with the orange series, and if I go back to chart and axis titles, you see how now that I added another axis, I've got right vertical axis. I can label this velocity, centimeters per second. This graph actually has meaning now. It's not as meaningless as it was a while ago, as long as you know to use the right vertical axis for red and use the left vertical axis for orange, which you still may not be clear when you first look at this graph, but at least now it's not complete nonsense. We're not going to be doing too much 2-axis stuff, but you can. Series, that was under series, by the way, where I figured out I could add an axis. This is also where you would add error bars, or we're never going to use data labels really. Trend line, we will use lots of trend lines. You can change the type of polynomial, fit. There's lots of different fits here we've kind of been discussing in class already. The error bars, the default setting for error bars is %. By the way, error bars are how you display uncertainty on a graph. If your uncertainty was plus or minus 1 centimeter, you would put a 1 there. And that's pretty small on this axis. If your uncertainty was 10 centimeters, you'd put a 10 there. And you can see, like, I don't really know what the value of this point is, but I know that it's somewhere here, plus 10 centimeters or minus 10 centimeters. The % and the standard deviation we'll probably never use. We'll use constant a lot because we're going to figure out our own uncertainties. Oh, I don't want that data labels button. For trend line, let me remind you, you can show R squared, which tells you closer to 1 is a better fit, closer to 0 is a worse fit. If you're in the right ballpark, it should be above 0.9 for sure. Label, use equation. Now, this orange data can be described by 70.5 times x oh wait, this is linear. It's definitely not linear. Let's try polynomial. Now, a constant negative 0.906 plus 6.93 times x plus 44.3 times x squared. This equation will always be, it's confusing because I've got x's everywhere. This x out front is the label of this data. This x inside this equation, Sheets will always use x as the variable to describe whatever you plotted on the horizontal axis. So you do have to kind of keep that straight in your head. Can you type in here and edit it? Yeah, you can. Look at that. You can type in here and edit it. If you know this is time, you can change that. Text label. Now, I'm not sure that will update if you change the data, but you can do that. What else? We were in series. I showed you how to add a trend line. Legend. That's this. If I change it to right, it throws it over here and it shrinks the graph a lot. I kind of like it on the top. It's up to you. Horizontal axis, you can change lots of options. One thing we might actually end up changing sometimes is the minimum and the maximum value. Like if I needed to display negative numbers, you can change, oh, that's too far, -5, -1. You can change the minimum and the maximum on the axis. Google Sheets does a pretty good job of automatically doing it. And if you erase what's in there and just hit enter, it will go back to auto-fitting. Auto-fit works most of the time, but sometimes it'll do something wonky, like this x is slightly negative, so it might have decided to include a bunch of negative space that you didn't really need, and you might need to go change the minimum and maximum bounds on the axis. You would do that under here. When you add a new vertical axis, you get a whole new option for that. Grid lines and ticks. If you don't like the spacing of where they put the tick marks, you can change that under here. All right, finally, the last thing is, what if you want two sets of data on the same graph, but you don't have data at exactly the same times? Time, position. Let me make up some data. Let me show you a trick also when I'm doing this. 0, 1, 1. By the way, tab moves to the right. If you're typing and you hit the tab key, it moves you to the right. Shift tab moves back to the left. Enter moves down. Shift enter moves up. Sometimes it's quicker to do that than go reach for the arrow keys. If I have a pattern of numbers going and I highlight it and then I drag that down, it will continue that pattern for you. It recognizes what the pattern is and it continues it. Let's say this position is F3 squared plus 5. Autofill. I'll accept the autofill. Now, I'm going to do intentionally different time values. All right, there's a pattern, and I filled in. None of these time values match those time values. Maybe I collected this data in Tracker, and I collected this data in Tracker, but it was from different videos, and I'm trying to display position versus time from those two videos on the same graph. Let's see, this is, I'm just making up a formula here. Autofill. I want to this both, it's all position and time data, so displaying it on the same graph would allow me to compare these objects, and I might want to do that. You have to kind of trick Google Sheets into doing this for you. What you've got to do is go over here and make a new time column, object 1. Let me label these so I know position of object 2. I'm going to put time here, position of object 1 here, position of object 2 here. The trick is copy all the time for object 1, paste it there, copy all the time for object 2, and go below where you just pasted that data and paste it there. We don't want it to be in order. Like, it's okay that it's out of order. What I need to know is this set of numbers goes with object 1, and then the next set of numbers goes with object 2. Now, the way I trick Google Sheets into putting it all in the same graph is this. I copy the position data for object 1, and I paste it starting at the same. This time needs to match that time, so I paste. Now, copy the position data. I don't want to put it right here, because if I put it right here, well, actually, I've got a weird thing going on. When you copy a formula, like you see how it copied the formula? I didn't actually want it to do that. So let me show you a trick. If you're ever copying and pasting things and you just want the numbers, but you don't, these numbers are calculated from a formula, but I really just want the numbers. When I paste, there's this little thing that pops up called paste formatting. If you click on paste values only, it erases the formula. These are now not based on the formula. They're just the numbers. And the problem I just ran into when I copy these and I paste them here, it actually updated the formula to match here. I didn't want that. I want these numbers. So Control Z is undo. That's how I'm quickly undoing. Control C, Control V, paste as values. This is better, but still bad. This is not going to let me graph the data on the same graph, because now these Y values are associated with these X values, and that's wrong. The time values for these numbers, Control X is called cut. You use cut when you want to delete things and move them somewhere else. I'm going to select this cell because it lines up with the actual first time for object 2. Paste there. And because I clicked on cut, Control X, when I paste, all those numbers go away, and now they're down here. Anyway, this was a long story to get to this. This is how I want the data arranged. And now if I select all of this and insert a chart, I have tricked Google Sheets into displaying two different sets of position and time data on the same graph. Same x-axis, same y-axis. So you can really compare whatever this data is. And if you lay it out like I did, it pretty intelligently labels everything. Like that label's right. Time is there. I'm not positive. It didn't know what to do with the vertical axis label, so I could add that myself. And it made it a line chart. You can make it a scatter plot. And from here, you can do all the same things. That's how you trick it into displaying multiple sets of the same kind of data, but on the same graph. All right, last section is keyboard shortcuts. If I want a new sheet, I can click my recording tool is hiding the new. All right, there we go. Add sheet. Okay, keyboard shortcuts. If you hold Control and hit slash, keyboard shortcuts pop up. There's a couple really useful ones. You don't have to use these, it just makes things faster to use them. When I'm selecting multiple cells, if I hold down Shift and move the arrow keys around, I can use the keyboard to select multiple cells. If I want to select a range of cells quickly that has data in it, Control D. It's not doing what I wanted it to do. Let's say, oh wow, I'm struggling here. Here we go. I got a bunch of numbers here. I'm here, I want to select all these numbers quickly. If I'm on the top one, I can hold Control Shift and hit down, and it selects until it sees that the numbers stop. That's a quick way to select a lot of numbers. Alternatively, I can click up here in this box, the name box, and I can type B3:B20 and hit enter. B3 was the first, colon means all the cells in between, and B20 is the last one. That still requires you to move the mouse up there. Keyboard shortcut purists don't want to move their mouse. What do you do then? You hit Control J. It brings you to the name box. You can type B3:B20, enter, and you never had to move the mouse. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Control C, click, Control V, that's copy. Control Shift down selects these. Control X is cut. Now when I paste over here, it disappears and reappears over here. That's the difference between copy and cut. Other keyboard shortcuts that are useful. And when I'm in, if I want this entire column, I can go click on E, or I can hit Control Space. Oh, I didn't know it did that. Look at that. Control Space the first time just selects the entire column of numbers, and it stops when it sees empty cells. If you hit Control Space again, it gives you the whole column. If you're in an empty column, it gives you the whole column. If I'm not in the numbers and I'm down here on an empty cell and I hit Control Space, it gives me the whole column. Wow, that's cool. Shift Space gives me the whole row. Alternatively, you can go click on the row number and it gives you the whole row. Trick that you might run into, like, this is a long sentence. You see how it runs over into the F column? You can click in between here on this line and you can drag it so that you can resize the columns, you can resize the rows. Another way to do what I just did would be to right click up here on the column heading, and then down here, resize column. You can literally pick a number of pixels, or you can just click fit to data. This will make it fit whatever the widest thing in this whole column is. You'll need to resize columns sometimes because the data is too wide for it to display. Other things. Number formatting sometimes. If you go to Format, Number, Automatic does a pretty good job, but sometimes it might think something is a date that's not a date, and you can change the format and force it to be a number. It's also a way you can force it to display a certain number of decimal places. There's so many more things you can do in a spreadsheet, but a lot of them are not useful at the moment for us. So I'm going to stop there. It's already a 38-minute spreadsheet tutorial. I think that's long enough. Goodbye.